Show for my boss, the pastor, Mark Hoffman.
Well, that's a first. I don't know what got that started, but it always feels good. At least, is there any water I could have, Mike? Hey, I'm going to put a picture up real quick. Man, it was hot today, but you guys, I wanted to join you guys in the pool because it was hot. It was too hot. All right, I want to know who recognizes that gal right there. Thanks. Who is she? Somebody. Exactly, Bethany Hamilton. You know, my favorite people are overcomers. People who overcome problems to achieve something great. And she's an overcomer. She was out surfing. She was a rising name, a young surf star. And she went out, believe it or not, on Halloween morning. And a 14-foot tiger shark took her left arm. And of course, everyone thought that was going to be the end of her surfing career. But do you know, just 1 month later, she was in the water? And just 1 year later, she won the amateur surfing championship. And 2 years later, she achieved her dream of being a pro surfer. Now, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? I appreciate people that overcome. And do you know that some of you are going to have the opportunity to be overcomers in your life? Do you know why? Because you have problems. Because you have things you're worried about. And because for many of you, later in your life, you're going to encounter problems. And it's how you handle those problems that determine whether you're going to be an overcomer or whether you're going to be like some people in life who just seem beaten by life. They're unhappy. Some of them become addicted to drugs or alcohol. Well, tonight I want to tell you a story. You are going to love this story. It's about one of the great overcomers that you could ever hear of. His name was Joseph. And his story is told in chapter 30, beginning chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. And he came from a very troubled, difficult situation to become second in command to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And in so doing, he was able to save tens of thousands of lives. But before that happened, he had to overcome 4 terrible problems. He had 4 betrayals in his life, 4 heartbreaks in his life, any one of which, can we make it a little less hot or something on the voice? Any one of which could have really wounded him. Let me tell you the first problem he had to overcome. It's a common one. All of his problems were common. You'll be able to relate to some of these. But his very first disappointment in life was that he was born into a family with problems. You know, God has an ideal family plan for the family. It's in this book. It said a man and a woman get married and that they love each other and are faithful to each other until one of them dies, and that they raise up their children and they give them a safe home and they teach them God's word and they teach the kids to respect each other. And I grew up in a home like that, and I want to tell you that is a wonderful experience to grow up in a home that follows God's pattern for life. And if you're growing up in a home like that, I hope you thank God. I hope you realize how lucky you are, because most homes today aren't like that anymore. We have drugs, we have alcohol, we have divorce, we have fighting. And so many homes are marked like that. Well, Joseph did not grow up in a home that was run the way God wanted it. As a matter of fact, Joseph grew up in a really messed up home. Do you know that Joseph's father had 4 wives? Now get this, ready? All at the same time. How many think that's messed up? You know, they still do that in some parts of the country. In Africa, that's called polygamy. They still have multiple wives. They still do in places in the Middle East. But where Joseph grew up so long ago, his father had 4 wives at the same time. Can you imagine the amount of fighting that went on in that house? 4 wives fighting over one husband. But to make things worse, between those 4 wives, they had 12 sons. And to make things worse, Joseph's father had a favorite wife. Her name was Rachel. It was Joseph's mother. Joseph was the baby of the family, and his mother was the favorite wife, so guess what? He was the favored son. You can imagine that his brothers hated this. Can you imagine, have you ever grown up in a family where there's favoritism? Or have you ever known a family where there's favoritism? Sometimes it happens when there's a divorce and maybe the new wife comes in and her kids are favored. I mean, it's easy, but there's a lot of homes in which there's favoritism. And Joseph's home, the favoritism was bad. And so his brothers hated him. Let's look at what happened. Because the first betrayal, I'm going to talk about 4 betrayals that he had to have. The first one was from his parents. Because even though he loved his parents, they did not provide a home for him that was safe, that was positive. It was a home in which there was a lot of hurt and pain. And I'm sure that he had many, many nights where he was listening to shouting. There were many times where he was being abused by his brothers. And so even though he loved his mother and his father, they failed to provide a safe home, a positive home for him. So that was the first betrayal. And then his brothers hated him. So let's look at that. Genesis 37, verse 4. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him. And they could not speak to him on friendly terms. You see, the older brothers ridiculed him. They bullied him all the time. And they could never say anything nice to him. But Joseph learned to get his comfort from God. Even as a young boy, he learned to turn to God and get comfort from God. And you know that God gave this young man gave him a great dream in his life. God spoke to him about great plans that God wanted to do in Joseph's future. But Joseph made one bad mistake. He told his brothers about the dream that God had given him, that he was going to do something great. And how do you think that made his brothers feel? They hated him all the more. And they were miserable, and they wanted to make him miserable. How many of you know miserable people want to make everybody else around them miserable? So they did everything they could to make his life miserable. Well, one day his brothers, who were all older than him, were sent out by their father to take care of the sheep. And they were about a full day's journey away. And so after a few days, the father decided he would send Joseph to go and check on the brothers and the sheep and report back how things were. Now his brothers hated him so much that watch what happened when they saw him approaching them. He traveled a day to get to them, and look what happened. Genesis 37, verse 18. When they saw him, the brothers, from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. How many know that's a messed up family? And they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him, and we'll throw him into one of these pits, and we'll say to our father, 'A wild beast devoured him.' Then we'll see what happens to his dreams." And so they hated him enough to kill him, and they almost did, except one brother got a great idea. He realized how they could make money. There were some slave traders that were camped nearby. And the brother said, "Why should we just kill our brother? Why don't we sell him to the slave traders and make some money?" So that's what they did. They sold him. But they were going to have to tell some kind of a story to their dad. So listen to the story they came up with. So they took Joseph's tunic, which is a coat, and they killed a male goat, and they dipped the tunic or coat into the goat's blood. And then they sent or took this coat, this tunic, and they brought it to their father, and they said, "Look what we found. We found this. Please examine it to see if it is your son Joseph's tunic or not." And when he, the father, examined it, he said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Surely Joseph has been torn to pieces. And so there's Joseph. He's been sold into slavery, and his father thinks he's dead. And so the second great betrayal in his life was from his brothers. How many of you know your brothers or your sisters are supposed to have your back? They're supposed to be for you. But sometimes in some families, it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes the people who should be closest to you can be like your worst enemies. That's how it was in his family. Now, his parents had failed to produce a safe, loving home. His brothers had failed him. They'd betrayed him. Here he is now going off to a foreign land captured by slave traders. How many know that could have been the end of the story right there? He could have just become a bitter young man, completely hopeless. And he could have stopped believing in God. He could have stopped praying for God. But you know what? That's not what happened. That's not how the story turns out. Because instead of doing that, instead of being focused on his problems and his circumstances, he decided to remember God. Remember that God is loving, God is faithful. So he decided that he would stop looking down and he would start looking up and believe that God could bless him, even though he came from an imperfect family, and even though he was facing a terrible problem. Well, the next thing that happened to poor Joseph is when he got to Egypt, he was sold as a slave to an Egyptian, a very rich Egyptian man named Potiphar. And rather than quit and feel sorry for himself, he continued to have faith and trust in God and watch what happened. You see, he knew that no matter where he was, God could still bless him. And so here's what happened in Potiphar's life. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, who was Potiphar, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, with Joseph, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. And so Joseph found favor in his master's sight. In other words, Joseph became his favorite. He became the favorite of all of his servants. And he made him his personal servant. He made him overseer of his house. And all that he owned, he put in his charge. And so Joseph, even though he was a slave, even though he was far from home, he still let God bless him. He still served God. And God blessed him so much that his master noticed it. He noticed that whatever he did prospered. And so he put everything he owned under Joseph's charge. So whenever Potiphar left and had to take a trip, guess who was in charge? Joseph. And so he had a good life. He was living in the big house, he was wearing the nice clothes, he was eating the good food. Even though he was a servant, he was second in command to a very rich man. You see, nothing that happens to you can stop God from blessing you. Nothing. You can betray a Christian, you can throw him in a pit, you can sell him to slave traders, you can make a slave out of him, but no matter where you are, God is bigger. How many of you know that God is bigger than your problems? And you can be sent to a foreign country and God knows where you are, no matter what the problem is. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. Because we've only seen 2 betrayals, and I told you there were 4. So here comes the next betrayal. The next betrayal comes from a woman. Genesis 39, verse 6. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now, if you don't know what handsome is, if I could have Cameron just stand up. That's handsome in form and appearance. Okay, so just picture Cameron as Joseph. And this woman looks at him. It came out after these events that his master's wife, so Potiphar's wife, looks with desire at Joseph. She looks at him and she goes, wow, he's pretty hot. And so she said, lie with me. And she spoke to Joseph day after day. So it wasn't just once, but every day she tried to tempt Joseph to do wrong. But he did not listen to her. He did not want to cheat with her against Potiphar, the wife. Now, here's the interesting thing. Here's Joseph. He's being a good man. He's serving the Lord, and God's blessing him wherever he is. He didn't choose to be a slave, did he? And yet he let God bless him. And now this woman begins to tempt him. The boss's wife wanted a boyfriend on the side. And even though he'd had a hard life, he did not use that as an excuse. He decided that he was going to be loyal to God, that he was not going to sin against God. Do you know, God is Lord of all of us. That includes our body. God says that sex is only between a man and a woman within the context of marriage. And so he did not consent to do that. Verse 11. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside. Potiphar was away on a trip. And so she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But what he did was he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and went outside. In other words, here's what he did. She grabbed him, and he just slipped right out of his coat and took off. He ran away from temptation. I wish more young people would do that. Here he was being tempted. Here he was being pressured. But he didn't worry about what people would think. He just ran away from the temptation. It's too easy for people to flirt with temptation. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, that's what happened to me in my life. I was raised as a Christian. When I got to high school, I just kind of hung around the wrong kids. I still wanted to do right, but I just hung around the wrong kids. And they were always doing the wrong things. And what I should have just done is left or found new friends. Let me ask you a question. What are you going to do when you're with a bunch of kids and they start to shoplift? See, a smart kid just takes off, just leaves. What are you going to do when you're at a party or something, or somebody brings out cigarettes or even marijuana or something? What are you going to do? I wish that I had run away. Because I didn't. Because I kept being with those friends. I kept being around temptation. I ended up eventually becoming an alcoholic. And from 17 to 23, my life was a total wreck. And I just thank God that I didn't kill somebody driving drunk. I thank God I wasn't killed. But it all started not because I wanted to do wrong, but because I didn't have the courage to just leave. Find new friends, leave that party. That's what we need to do. That's what he did. But watch what happened, because here comes the betrayal. Here it comes. So she left his garment beside her and waited until Potiphar came back, the husband. And then she lied. She spoke to Potiphar these words. The Hebrew slave, and a Hebrew is another word for Jewish, that Hebrew slave Joseph, whom you brought to us, look what he did. He came into me. He tried to attack me. And when I screamed, he ran off and left his coat behind. Is that what happened? That is nothing at all what happened. And so she betrayed him. And here's the funny thing. She said that she loved him. She said, "Oh, Joseph, you and I, we can be so happy together. Joseph, I love you with all my heart." But because he didn't do the wrong thing with her, she turned on him and she betrayed him. And you know, that hurts when somebody says they care about you and they betray you. It hurts when you have friends. Maybe you grow up, some of you guys might be experiencing this. You grow up with friends in school and all of a sudden they just kind of leave you out. They just kind of turn their back on you. They find new friends. Or maybe they start doing wrong things and you just can't go along with them. And so that's what happened. She got betrayed. He got betrayed by this woman. And it's easy to get betrayed by somebody who said they were your friend or said they love you, and that hurts. So what did Joseph do? He did what he always did. He turned to God. He found his comfort in God. He trusted God to bless him even in the midst of a bad situation. And that led to the fourth betrayal. Ready for number 4? You guys counting? Here's what happened in the fourth betrayal. It has to do with what happened when the husband got home. Verse 19. Now when his master, that is Potiphar, heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the jail. Now Joseph had made this man a lot of money. Joseph had been honest. And how did he get repaid? His master didn't believe him. And so the fourth betrayal was by the system. Because the police showed up, the popo, and they arrested him. And then they put him in jail. And then he had a trial. And you know, all those things, the police are supposed to protect you. Your boss is supposed to believe you when you tell the truth. When you go to court, they're supposed to defend the innocent. Innocent people are not supposed to be thrown in jail. But here is Joseph, who did nothing wrong, in jail because the system failed him. And sometimes the system fails people. Even though it's meant to help. Schools are meant to help. Social services are meant to help. Family court is meant to help. Police. But sometimes when we're growing up and going through life, even the things that are supposed to help us can let us down. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are people in this room that have been hurt, maybe in a foster home situation, or you've been hurt because of family court, or maybe you've got loved ones that are in jail and it's torn your family apart. But that's what happened to him. The system failed him. Everyone and everything failed this man. First his parents, then his brother, then Potiphar, then this woman, then the prison, and here he is now in jail without any rights. His father thinks he's dead. He's got no future. Would anybody like to change places with Joseph? No matter what your problems are, do any of you think that your life is as messed up as his life was? That the problems that you are facing are as big as the ones that he had to face? And yet the amazing thing is, the story doesn't end there. You'd think it would. You'd think after all he'd been through, all the betrayals, you'd think that he would just die and rot in jail. And yet, the secret to this guy is he understood God is good. He understood that no matter where you are, God knows where you are. No matter what you're going through, God is with you. That no matter what anybody does to you or says about you, God can still bless you. And so he did what he always did. He sought the face of God. He prayed to God. He tried to do right. And guess what? It was noticed. And watch what happens now. Here he is in jail. And now we're in verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph while he was in jail and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in jail, so that whatever was done there, he, Joseph, was responsible for it. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with Joseph. And here it is again. And whatever he did, the Lord made him prosper. When he was sold as a slave to Potiphar, God blessed him. He rose to the top. And when he was betrayed there and thrown in jail, rather than becoming bitter and angry, he served God. He prayed to God. God prospered him. And he became second in command to Pharaoh. Jail could not stop God from blessing Joseph? Nothing could. The greatest champions and overcomers in life are those that understand that no matter what bad thing happens to you, God is still good. And no matter how you can look at the circumstances and feel hopeless or discouraged, if you'll just look up, you'll see a loving God looking down upon you, who knows where you are and who can bless you right where you are. Well, here it comes. Here's where the story turns around. So for 4 times he's been betrayed. 2 more years pass, he's in jail. And Pharaoh is just another name for king. When they talk about the Pharaoh of Egypt, it's the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh has a dream, and this dream freaks him out. He knows it's important, and no one can tell him what it means. It's a weird dream. It's 2 dreams, actually. In the first dream, there's these 7 beautiful cows sitting on the bank of the Nile River. And then out of the Nile River come these ugly, scrawny, skinny, sickly, diseased-looking cows. They come up and they eat the healthy cows up. They just gobble them down and they're gone. And the skinny cows just look as unhealthy as ever. And then the next dream, he's looking and there's this field of corn. And there's these 7 beautiful ears of corn. I mean, they're like the most plump and beautiful you can think of. And next to them are 7 terrible, shriveled ears of corn on stalks. And the 7 ugly ones come and gobble up the good ones. And somehow he knows that this dream is so important and no one can tell him what it means. And then someone that worked close, one of his close associates and aides said, you know what? When I was in jail, I met a young Hebrew named Joseph. And when I had an incredible dream I couldn't figure out, Joseph prayed to his God. And he told me the interpretation of the dream. And it happened exactly like Joseph said. And so Pharaoh said, well, bring that young man in here. And so they brought Joseph from jail to stand before the Pharaoh. And here is how that went, because Joseph interpreted the dream. Verse 25. What could that mean? The skinny cow eating, the nice cow. Now Joseph said to Pharaoh, here's what Pharaoh's dreams mean. Both dreams mean the same thing. God has told the Pharaoh what he is about to do. Here's what's going to happen. Behold, there's going to be 7 years of great abundance. All the cows are going to be fat, eating on all the grass, and all the corn is going to grow like crazy. And after that, there'll be 7 years of famine in which hardly anything will grow, and all the animals will become skinny. And all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt because the famine will ravage the land. But then Joseph did something more than just tell him what the dream meant. He told Pharaoh what he should do. So let Pharaoh take action and appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact a fifth or 20% of the produce during the 7 years of abundance. And let them gather these good things, all the good stuff up, and store them up in storehouses so they'll have extra food when the famine comes. When Pharaoh heard how wise Joseph was, when Pharaoh heard how Joseph could hear from God, when Pharaoh heard how excellently Joseph had taken care of the whole prison system, then Pharaoh said, "You're the man." And he took Joseph out of prison and made him second in command to himself. And that's how Joseph, by administrating all this food that came in the first 7 years and storing it away for the years of famine, that's how he saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Listen to me, including the lives of his family. Had he not been in that situation, his family would have died. They came to Egypt because they heard there was food there. And he was reconciled to his family and his brother. Finally, God's promises and purpose had come to pass. It was an amazing turnaround. Now, I want you to think about what happened. His brothers betrayed him. In fact, his brothers betrayed him, but through that betrayal, God used that to get him down to Egypt. This is where he needed to be if he was going to save all those people. And he was sold as a slave in Potiphar's household. But because he trusted in God, because he tried to do right, by being a slave in Potiphar's household, he learned economics, he learned bookkeeping, he learned management. And although he was betrayed and it made him go into prison, it was there that he met the king's official, which one day took him in front of Pharaoh. Let me give you a verse that's a very important verse to remember. Romans 8, verse 28. This is one you should all memorize. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. In other words, what that says is that God, no matter what happens in your life, God can work it all and weave it all together to bring something good out of it. Isn't that interesting? God can use every negative thing that ever happened in your life, and he can bring good out of it. He took all those negative things that happened in Joseph's life, and he made good out of it. How many of you guys were at Future Quest? So you know the last night at Future Quest, we had Bill Wilson speak. And when you hear Bill Wilson's story, and you realize that he was born to a father who was an alcoholic and left the family. The mother was an alcoholic, and if you remember the story, she left him behind when he was 12 years old, just left him sitting on a drainage culvert, walked away, and never came back. He grew up on hand-me-downs. He was born with a cleft palate. I don't know if you know what a cleft palate is, but he had to have a lot of surgery on his mouth. He had rickets, so that he had a hard time walking when he was young. And yet, he's the man he is today because God used all those things. That's why he goes around the world and helps kids, because he knows what it's like. That's where he developed his character. See, no matter what you're facing, what God wants you to do is take your eyes off the circumstances and look up. Now, what was it that allowed Joseph to overcome all these problems? This is the key right here in the next 5 minutes. Joseph knew two secrets, and these two secrets are what allowed him to overcome every setback. And the secrets are in the story, but you can't find them unless you know where to look, because the secrets are in code. You find the secrets by finding what he named his two sons. He had two sons when he was in Egypt. Why would you name your kids after these two secrets you learned? Answer, you never wanted to forget them. Every time he called his two sons, he called one, he called the other. It reminded him of the two most important lessons that he ever learned in life. So let's find out what his sons' names are. Verse 51, Genesis 41, verse 51. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and all my father's households. Manasseh means to forget. He named his first son to forget. He says, because God made me forget all my problems. Do you know what destroys most people's lives? All they ever think about is their problems. All they ever think about is what is wrong with their life. And if you are consumed with your problems, if you are focused on your problems, then your problems will consume and destroy your life. The first lesson that he had to learn, by the way, Garrett, you could start setting that up for me. The first lesson that he had to learn was he had to quit looking at his problems, forget about them, and look up and see God. You know, if you are focused on your problems, you'll never be thankful to God, and you'll miss the opportunities that God brings into your life. Do you know some of you guys, camp is a great opportunity for you. Some of you guys, youth group is an opportunity. Some of you guys, youth venture is an opportunity. But some people are so focused on their problems, they can't see them. God helped Joseph forget his problems. What opportunities might you be missing in your life because you're too busy being worried, or you're too busy? That's good. You can just thank you. Perfect. You're too busy being worried, or you're too busy feeling sorry for yourself. Let's look at the second thing he learned, okay? Genesis 41:52. So the first lesson, secret, God taught Joseph to forget about his problems and not dwell on them. Second one, he named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my afflictions. He did not choose to be a slave. He did not choose to be in Egypt, but he let God bless him right where he was. Here's the second thing you need to learn. God can bless you right where you are. You say, well, man, if only this would change. If only my parents would get back together. If only kids wouldn't bully me at school. Listen, God can bless you no matter what the circumstances are of your life. And that's what he said. Ephraim means extra fruitful. He said, God blessed me in the land of my affliction. Here's my question. And the band can begin to come up here. Here's my question for each one of you. Is God big enough to bless you no matter what your problems are? I want you to think about your life. I want you to think about the negatives in your life, the difficulties in your life, and I want you just to ask yourself an honest question. In fact, just close your eyes for a minute and just ask yourself this question. Is God big enough to bless me and find me even in the midst of this problems? And can God find me right where I am? The question is, can you follow in the footsteps of Joseph? To do that, you have to do two things. Just think right now about some of the things that you worry about, some of the obstacles that are in front of you in your life, some of the things that are problems. And here's the first thing. Joseph said, God told me how to forget about that, how to not be focused on that, but instead be focused on him. And the second thing is, are you willing to let God bless you right where you are? God cannot bless you if you're complaining. God cannot bless you if you're angry. He can't bless you if you're bitter. He can't bless you if you're lying and stealing and doing all those things. Are you willing to do what Joseph did, to just seek God right where you are and let him bless you? I want to encourage you guys to do something. I want you guys to do this. Where'd you put? Do you know where those? Oh, here it is. The first thing is this. On these tables, I've got a black card. And for some of you, I want to encourage you to do this. If you have some worries, if you have some problems in your life, some things that you need to quit being focused on, I want you to come up and I want you just to write. There's pencils here. Just write what that is. No one's going to know what you put down. No one's going to know, but write it down. The thing that you worry about, the thing that makes you depressed, the thing that makes you sad, the thing that makes you afraid about the future, the thing you wish you could change but can't. Just write it down on here, and then just come and just drop it. Just give it to God. God wants you to forget it. He wants you to give it to him, just like Joseph did, and he wants you to just let him carry it. He doesn't want you to be focused on it. So just give it to God. Give that heavy thing to God. And then I'm going to put these are little like gems. And I want you to take then one of these gems, because the secret is to give God your problems and not to carry them anymore, and then to take up his promises. This is just a little gem you can put in your pocket and just keep it in your pocket for the week. And every time you start to feel sorry for yourself, every time you start to worry, just reach in your pocket and just feel that. Because what that reminds you of is that God has a treasure for you. God has wonderful promises. God wants to give you riches and jewels in your life. But you got to quit looking at your problems. You got to start looking up. You got to be like Joseph. Joseph followed God and trusted God no matter what happened, and God blessed him. And in the end, his dreams were fulfilled. So as we sing this song, I'm going to just pour some of these out here on this thing here. And I want you, just close your eyes, bow your heads for a minute, because I don't want people to look around. But I want to know, as I've been preaching this message, how many of you guys have some problems that are on your mind? Just lift your hand up. I just want to know if I'm talking to the right audience. You guys have some real things that are problems. I want to invite you. Everybody doesn't have to come up at the exact second and make a cattle jam. We're going to sing a song. And I want you to write down whatever that is on that black sheet of paper, whatever your problems are. You might have 2, you might have 1, you might have 4. And I want you to put it down, and I want you to say, I'm not going to carry this blackness anymore. I want you to take that heavy black thing, and I want you can just put it on the floor. You can put it here on the stage on either side. And then I want you to come over here and just take one gem that you can carry around your pocket to remember that you have traded your sorrows for a new future, for God's riches. That you're not going to let your problems determine your life. You're going to let the goodness of God determine your life. As we sing, come on up. I hope you'll be able to see what you write down, but it doesn't matter if you can see it or not. But as we sing, those of you who put your hands up that you had a problem, just come up now. Just fill that out. Throw it over here on the side of the stage, either side, and just come over here and get one of these gems to carry in your pocket that will remind you. It will remind you. You can wait until it opens up. We're going to sing a song. But write that thing down on that paper that you're giving to God. Write that thing down.